Welcome to Burning River Radio, the show that's a complete lie because we're not burning, we're not in a river, and this isn't radio. I'm Joe Coblitz. You can follow me on Twitter at BurningRiverBB, and he is Justin Lada, a whole lot of Lada, at JL_baseball. If you listened last time, he did not tell me not to call him that, so we're keeping it up. So, like last week, I think we were like the happiest episode ever because the Indians had just swept the Twins in 4 games. They'd won the last game against the Dodgers, scoring tons of runs. Then they go to Baltimore and score a ton more runs, just runs all over the place. And then they scored 2 runs over the weekend against the Twins in 3 games.
Weird.
It's fairly miserable. It's hard to explain other than random variance. There's a lot of little nitpicky things. I'll say one thing that'll drive me nuts every time, and we've talked about this. One of the shows, maybe Tribe Time Now, I can't remember. Maybe it was even Dorf on Sports when I was on. I can't remember the different shows I do. But one of the shows I was on, we had talked about the things that you believe in that aren't that don't matter. And I said one of the things that always bug me, and I know it doesn't really matter when it comes down to the game, is lineup construction. Other than you put your best guys, other than the guys at the top who will get more at bats than everyone else, it doesn't really matter the order. I mean, sometimes you could say matching up with lefties, but a lot of times those lefty-righty splits aren't real. Like Lonnie is hitting lefties fine this year. Zimmer is hitting lefties fine this year. So, like alternating lefty and righty, and so many Indians hitters are switch hitters anyway, that doesn't matter. So lineup construction is very overrated. It's not that important. But it drives me nuts when you say a guy is only good enough to be a number 9 hitter, or he's only good enough to be a bench guy and play twice a week. And then you give someone in the top 4 a day off, and all of a sudden that guy who's only good enough to be a bench hitter becomes your leadoff hitter, your number 2 hitter. That shit drives me crazy. It just doesn't make any sense.
That's the argument. You want to keep everybody else in the same order, but then you're totally.
But that in that particular game, it wasn't. Yeah, they're mixing up the order anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
So it just like that because in that particular game they put Eric Gonzalez second, and they moved Lindor to third, and he has been leading off generally or hitting second. Like they've been shuffling stuff around a lot lately anyway.
How many times have we seen Robertson hit second?
Yeah, that too. That's even worse to me.
Yes.
So I'll say that bugs me, but I really don't think that has anything to do with the Indians not scoring. Yes, there were a couple times where he came up and struck out. I think it was Friday. Maybe it was Saturday. Which game was that? Do you remember? It doesn't matter. They lost him. Robertson struck out twice with runners in scoring position. It must have been Saturday, within a 2-run game. And it was because he was hitting second. If he had been hitting anywhere else, that would have been someone else hitting second. Maybe they wouldn't have struck out with runners in scoring position. Maybe you score some runs there.
Yeah, I'll never understand that. For the sake of keeping everybody else in the same spot, like you're still messing with things. Like
yeah, and I can't. First thing, I can't imagine the players actually care. Like, I mean, sometimes Grady Sizemore cared. He's the last guy I really remember where he came out and said, I need to hit lead off, and if you don't hit me lead off, I'm going to be pissed off. He's the last guy I remember who publicly came out and said that. I don't remember anyone else saying that.
I remember Tito experimented with Santana hitting second, and I'm pretty sure Santana, not publicly, but said to Francona, and Francona relayed the message that he didn't really like hitting second.
Okay, well, but
there have been some guys.
That's fine, I guess, and that's one spot as well. He didn't say, I don't like hitting 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. I only want to hit first.
Just not
If
second.
you just say, I don't want to hit second. I can also understand someone not wanting to lead off. I understand, stupid, whatever, anecdotal, whatever. When I played baseball, I was a number 2 hitter. I love being a number 2 hitter because you get to see the first guy go up there and face the pitcher. So, like, I understand if you were a number 2 hitter, like Robbie Alomar or whatever, back in the day, the leadoff hitter go through a little bit of the sequence of pitches before you get to go up there and face them. And some hitters want to be the leadoff hitter and they want to go first. So I can see that, but I don't see why you put your worst hitter, literally the worst hitter. Why not put Lonnie second? Lonnie's hitting like crazy. You're hitting him seventh. Why not put him up and hit him second? Like, there's a lot of other options. But again, it's stupid. It doesn't matter. It's not why they lost by quick math, 13 runs. 13-2, they got outscored this weekend. It is not that difference.
And one of those runs came on a wild pitch. It wasn't a hit.
Well, the other one was Jose Ramirez hit a home run. So that would have happened no matter what the lineup is.
And then he doubled today, but they didn't score. Nobody was able to hit him in. The only thing I'll say about lineup is that I can understand probably not putting lefties back-to-back. I mean, sometimes the splits don't matter. But I can understand not putting Zimmer and Chisenhall back-to-back or something. If you get it late in the game into the bullpen where, let's say a team might have a really good left-handed reliever, it's a little more difficult probably then if you have a guy who's, nobody has Andrew Miller or Boone Logan, but you definitely would like to split them up because of the chances you have there.
I didn't want to get deep into this. My point was that it doesn't make up 13 runs in 3 games. It might make up 1 run in 20 games. Affect that many runs that quickly. It was just, and I think it's just one of those random variance things. Somebody on Twitter was going nuts, and more than one person, but one person specifically that I saw was going nuts that the Indians weren't trying hard enough.
Yeah, I'm sure they wanted to lose. I'm sure they wanted to lose.
Who doesn't like? So some days they try. So last weekend they were trying really hard against the Twins, but this weekend when they were at home, they weren't trying at all. They were like, whatever, who cares? It's so ridiculous. And Corey, so Corey Kluber was trying because he struck out 13, but nobody else was trying except maybe Jose Ramirez because he had a home run.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure none of those guys always want to win. I'm sure there's times they're like, we don't care if we win. Yeah, I'm sure that's how that works.
Yeah, you really think I've seen in the intensity that most of these guys play with. Carlos, maybe you don't see intensity in him, but mostly. But he's there. They are who they are day in and day out. So I don't know. It's to pretend like they're not trying. I think it's people trying to put an excuse on it of why it happens when random variance is what it is. I mean, that's why you have to play 162 games, because you're going to lose so many. Necessarily makes sense.
It's a long season.
I mean, you can even the Orioles are a pretty good team. The game they won, and the other 3 games, they scored a total of 4 runs against the Indians in 3 games. They're a great offensive team. Even including the one they scored 10 runs in 4 games, that's not very much for them. So that was a really bad stretch for them. But
they allowed 5 more runs in 20 games. That doesn't mean they're good.
Yeah, that's the pitching staff. I'm talking about the offense. They have an elite offense. They have a very poor pitching staff.
And somehow the Indians shut them down for the most part.
Yeah, and that's the type of team that the Indians pitching staff does best against. Like I said, they don't. I've said that in the past. They do poorly against teams like the Royals and the Twins, the teams that are patient and they slap hit and they'll, or not patient. The teams that'll come up quick and look for that first pitch fastball and they'll slap it in and they'll go opposite field with it. They'll put it wherever they need to. They do poorly against those teams, but they do really well against teams like Houston, Boston, Baltimore. Those big swinging teams that like to come up there and hack.
Well, that's great. Those are teams that are going to see in the playoffs. So good.
Yeah, and those are the teams they generally do really well against. And I think it's because their pitches have so much movement on it that you can't. If you sit there and take strike 1, thinking you're going to work a walk against Corey Kluber or Carlos Carrasco, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. I mean, maybe against even Josh Tomlin. If you sit there and take strike 1 against Josh Tomlin, you're way behind because he's not going to walk you. And you just let him get his greatest advantage of getting a strike across, and now he's got you, where he wants you, and he can work on the corners and stuff like that.
So what you're saying is this weekend's not really a big deal.
honestly, I don't think any game is a big deal. Any series is a big deal for the entire season. It sucks that they fell back in second place. I think that's kind of embarrassing for them. And maybe they can try to use it as a rallying point, but they were in second place like 2 weeks ago. I mean,
They were in second place going into Minnesota.
the series
That was a week ago.
against Minnesota last time. So, and I guess you get the point, but then they let it go again. So, I don't think it's intent.
I'm just reading some of this stuff, and it's like, hope they go on an 80-game road trip. Scrubs, no excuse for how bad they've played at home. Yada yada yada. Like those comments are just. I mean, everybody overblows 3-game stretches. Like I don't know if it's the fact that there was expectations this year, or I thought there were expectations last year, but apparently it's bigger this year. I don't know. That's getting people more frustrated, I guess, and more hot takey.
Expectations are way. I don't know that the fans are complaining more than they did last year. I think there were plenty of people complaining last year and every year that ever has been. And I guess that's part of being a fan. An entire series and see him 2 scores. It's really disappointing. As a fan, if you offering that deal earlier this month to buy games. So let's say you bought all the weekend games. You're there for the entire series. You're like, yes, they're coming home. They just came back on this road trip. They did so well on the road trip. They scored 2 runs in 3 games. I mean, that feels like you just wasted a lot of money as a fan. Watching them on TV, it's like you just wasted 12 hours or 9 to 12 hours. However long those games were exactly. When Kluber's pitching. Watching Kluber pitch.
Except when his defense doesn't catch the ball on simple grounders and throws the ball into the outfield on pickoffs. So somebody made the comment to me yesterday.
What about the rest of the game?
It was terrible. I mean, somebody made the comment to me yesterday that
somebody comments.
They got the Kluber early. That's the only time you can get to him. Except they didn't really get to him. If Kipnis makes that play, that run doesn't score. There's 3 outs, and
but also he struck out like 13 of innings. Was it? Yeah, because he didn't pitch the last 2, so he struck out 13 to 7 innings. So essentially, you just putting the ball in play was getting to him.
Apparently.
Yeah, but that is true. Kluber, like that, when teams have had success against Kluber, it's teams like the Royals and Twins who come in the count, swing early, get that first pitch they like, and put it in play.
Right, that's but he gave up 1 hit. He gave up 1 hit in the first inning, and he walked a batter, which isn't good. But
it was an incredible game for him. That was one of the best games he's had, and every game is one of the best games he's had, I guess.
Not for Paul Molitor. Paul Molitor said that Larry Vanover struck out 5 guys on his own.
And that was probably true.
Paul Molitor is a bitter old dude, though. He's never Paul Molitor will never give the other team credit. He never does.
Okay, but look at that. What was it? The game against the Orioles I think it was the game they lost. The Indians lost against the Orioles. Insane. And every pitch that was like anything plate, if you're facing the plate, everything to the right side was called a strike. And everything to the left side, even if it was a strike, was called a ball. And because the Indians' lineup is so left-handed heavy, they were getting killed by it. And because the Orioles' right lineup wasn't that left-handed heavy, the Indians only had 1 pitch in that zone called a strike. But the Indians only threw 1 pitch in that zone. So it wasn't like they were calling it unfairly for both teams. Like, it wasn't like they were calling it for the Orioles. It's just the Orioles were pitching to that zone and the Indians were not. In that game as well. And the Indians could have complained about that and said he didn't strike out that many. The umpire did, but they didn't. At least not as far as publicly, as far as I'm aware. But you could say that about a few different games. It wasn't just like, obviously, you can't say that those pitches were fair, that they were calling for Kluber.
I didn't have a good seat. I was at the game. I didn't really have a good seat for it, so I couldn't tell you if they were or not.
And I saw them on Statcast. So, baseball savant.
Well, then credit to Yan Gomes, I guess. Like he did one good thing this weekend.
I did want to talk about the Indians pitching staff beyond Corey Kluber, because there's been a lot of talk, and I guess it's because it's the end of June, and the Marlins are looking to trade Edini Echeverria or whatever his name is, and so apparently that's the start of the trade season.
What a way to kick it off!
So
shortstop who's owed a lot of money that could never hit. That's
yeah.
a great way to start. And there's already a mystery team involved. How about that?
Oh, is it? I thought it was Boston.
It's Boston. No, it was St. Louis, somebody else, and then a mystery team.
I really don't want to talk about this either. Okay. Anyway, my point was so it's the beginning of the trade season. So Indians fans immediately go to, and maybe it's a radio show thing, go to who do the Indians need to trade for? And I don't listen to any Cleveland radio. The only two out of Cleveland. I'll listen to Burning River Radio when the basketball guys are on. But the only baseball podcast I listen to is Baseball and Brews, which is Boron and a couple dudes who no one cares about. And they've spent like 3 weeks talking about this shit. And I'll say the first, between all the stuff I've seen on Twitter and everything, the first reasonable discussion I heard about it was when Brad Waddella, who is one of those dudes, had Danny Cunningham, who writes for Burning River Basketball, on the show. And they were talking about it, and it was the first person I heard say, if the Indians made a trade for a starting pitcher, Mike Clevenger would have to go the other way, or else it doesn't make any sense. You have to replace somebody in the Indians' rotation. So we know they're not going to replace Josh Tomlin, and hopefully they'll cut him tomorrow and prove me wrong. They're not going to replace Josh Tomlin. Right? There's no way.
Unless he has 4 or 5 bad more outings. I don't know. I mean, at some point.
But he's had those in his career. He's had those in his career. I can't imagine they're ever going to cut him. They might put him in the bullpen for a couple of weeks like they did last year. He was so awful in August last year. Things you've ever seen any pitcher do ever. And they stuck with him. They pitched him game after game after game. He was way beyond what his innings limit should have been for the season. And they kept throwing him out there every 5 days. And they killed that man. And he was so terrible.
And they still won the division somehow. Imagine that.
Yeah, well, okay, maybe that's part of the point here. That's the secondary point. But there's no way they're getting rid of Tomlin. I personally think that Danny Salazar still has ace stuff. He may be the number 3 pitcher on the Indians injury, and they may try to stick him in the bullpen again. But I see him as a starter, and I see him as a number 3 starter. I see Mike Clevenger as a number 4, number 5 starter. And then there's Trevor Bauer. So the Indians have 6 starters. And everybody wants them to trade for a starter. So you're talking about, and of course, you don't want to trade for some starter somewhere. You want to trade for the best starter on the market. Well, everybody wants the best starter on the market. So to get the best starter on the market, you got to make a trade like they did for Miller, except Miller wasn't a starter. So you got to pay even more than they paid for Miller. For Miller, they paid their top prospect. Frazier was the top prospect. And not only the top prospect, but the top 2 relief prospects in Ben Heller and JP Fireisen, 1 and 2, as far as Indians relievers go, in the minors. And, wait, no, he's lefty. So, yeah. Either their best or second best left-handed starting pitcher in Justice Sheffield. So a package like that, and you're talking about getting a top starter from a team, like let's say Jose Quintana. You would talk about not just Clevenger going back, but Francisco Mejia and Tristan McKenzie and I don't know, Aaron Savali and Greg Allen. Like you'd be talking about 6 guys going back, all of whom would be in the Indians' top 50 prospects. They are not going to take straight up for Jose Quintana. They are not going to take Trevor Bauer for Jose Quintana. It's not like, and you would need a pitcher of Jose Quintana's caliber to improve the Indians' pitching staff, because you have to have a pitcher who's better than Danny Salazar.
But is he, though? He's not having a great year.
Well, Danny Salazar's not even pitching right now, so.
Well, no, but I mean, Quintana's still struggling. So
okay, so you have to. I personally think you have to have a pitcher who's better than Salazar, because Salazar is better than Tomlin, and he can replace Tomlin.
Sure.
You tell me who you think, if you think there's any reason in any of this. Number 7.
What? Repeat that question you cut out. I'm waiting for you to. Sorry,
tell me if there's any reason in any of this number.
I missed the first part of the question because you cut out.
In the Indians trading for a starting pitcher.
Do I see any sense?
You still
in
can't
it?
hear this? We need an editor.
I
was talking about them trading for Quintana. I hope any of that. Is there a Quintana? But can you describe a situation where the Indians could trade for and make the team better?
For who's going to be on the market, like realistically?
Yes, realistically.
I guess you could say Garrett Cole.
Minor leaguers, because they have. But then what would you do with the rotation? What are you talking about that actually costing them physically? And don't say like one.
Physically for Garrett Cole?
Who don't like Sun Chang or something like that.
Physically for Garrett Cole, I think Garrett Cole is probably the best option if you're going to actually upgrade the rotation. You're probably talking, Tristan McKenzie, Francisco Mejia, maybe Tyler Naquin and Mike Clevenger. I mean, you're talking a 4 or 5 for one, probably 5.
I don't think anyone would take Naquin right now. This trading a starter would take put Clevenger in the rotation right now, and at least.
Hello?
Yeah, you can.
I don't know. I think I totally lost you there for a minute.
Listen. I got my number now, and now you don't want to hear it.
Hello? Are we there?
Justin, you gotta talk to me. No.
Well, this is going well.
You can't hear me at all?
I can hear you a little bit now. Are you still with me? Hello? You still with me?